Wow, have you ever seen a movie or heard somebody say something or read something that you're like, oh, that's my experience at this time? You ever had that experience? God can use such a variety of different things. So this was my experience. This is a number of years ago now. And I was watching a movie. I'm not necessarily saying you have to go out and watch this movie. It's not a Christian movie, it's just a secular movie, but I thought it had a good theme to it. The movie was called Riptide. If you know Debbie Ryan, she's in the movie, and she plays this character named Cora. So Cora's this model. She's late teens, early 20s, is dissatisfied. Like initially on the outside, you're looking at it like, you've probably seen movies like this. You're like, okay, yeah. And she's unhappy with her life. Her mom's putting a lot of pressure on her, and she's not even sure if she wants to do this. But something happens in her life, and she gets really hurt and really embarrassed, and she leaves the country. She goes to visit her Aunt Margot in Australia. And this is where I think the movie gets really good. So she ends up in Australia with her aunt, who she hasn't seen in a while, doesn't know super well, but used to spend some time with her. And her aunt and her uncle were pro surfers, but her uncle had died maybe the year before in some surfing accident. And Margot, who's the aunt, there's a scene in the movie where Margot goes out, and she's out in the ocean. She hasn't been surfing. You can imagine when we've lost people, sometimes it's hard to do the things that they have done before you did together or whatever. She hasn't been out in so long. She can't, it's so heavy on her and so much grief. And she's out in the ocean. She's out on not a good day. It's a stormy day. Probably should not be out there. But she is just racked with grief, and she's, having this big emotional moment, and she's just like, I can't do this, and, she's just in so much pain. You can just see and just feel the storm as she's out there. And she finally just lets go of the surfboard. She just starts to drop under. And Cora sees her. Cora is not a strong swimmer, but she's been learning as she's been there. And Cora gets on a surfboard, and I don't know how, but it's movie magic. She goes out, and she's able to, of course, go out, and she grabs Margot at the last possible minute and pulls Margot up to safety. But Margot was drowning at the time. And I want to show you a little clip of this. Warning, it's not very long, just to get the sense of like the movie, a feel for it. And so this is Cora helping Margot. Have you ever been there? Hopefully not literally. But ever felt that? Ever felt like the waves were taking you under, being plowed under? But here's the punchline. God is like Cora, more so because he knows our experience much more. And we are not alone, right? Margot thrashing out in those waves, she got tossed basically off the surfboard. And I imagine God in our storms, in those brokenhearted moments, doing the same thing. You hear Cora yelling out for her name, calling out for Margot, right, throughout that. So if you're carrying a heavy heart today, I want you to know through this series we're going to do that God sees your pain. He sees your struggle, and he has not forgotten you. I think one of the biggest lies that we can believe is that in our pain and in our hurt, that God has completely forgotten us, doesn't care, leaves us all alone. That's a lie. I'm just going to tell you that straight off the bat. Because I know, while that movie is fictitious, we know that there are many, many stories where people have helped other people, rescued other people, literally and just emotionally being there for other people. We know that even though it's a movie, it's based off of real life experience. And if humans have that urge to go and comfort and be with, how much more is the God behind that looking for, seeking to comfort and be near those who are hurting and broken? If we have that same experience. And see, we know that God draws near to the brokenhearted and actually offers his presence, his healing, and his strength. When I was thinking about this sermon series, I was confessing to April that I didn't know until Thursday of this week what I was going to preach on. Any of you have ever had to give a talk and just didn't know? I knew it was coming, but it was one of those ones, Marla, I'm sure you can relate to, where you're like, I don't have any ideas. I'm not in the middle of it. That's the nice thing about having a series is you have an idea of, I'm going to do part whatever. And I didn't have any whatsoever. And so I went to my Bible journals because I like to write different things down. And I was flipping through, looking, go, nope, done a sermon series on that, trying to find something that I have in my mind that I don't have to recreate. And I came across this 2-page section that had on the top verses for a broken heart, a hurting heart. And I was like, oh, maybe. But it brought me right back to this moment in that movie, because I remembered why I had wrote out this list in the first place. Is one of the times I was watching this movie, it was literally right after the scene. Margot's safe, and those of you who have pets will know this experience. And I'm all into the movie, and then, somebody needs to go out. Like, insistently needs to go out. And I'm like, well, I guess we're going to pause the movie. We'll go take the dogs out. So I go outside, and I'm really like, oh, it was such a powerful moment. And I'm also, at that time, too, was like hurting. I think there were some friendship things going on, and I was just like, oh. But I walked outside, and I'm all like, oh, this turmoil that I just watched, this great movie. I'm all in. If you've seen a good movie or been in a part where you're just really into it, I was really into it. And now I'm outside in the cold, by the way. It was like wintertime, and I'm like, it's chilly, dogs are out. But I'm looking at the stars. It was one of those clear nights in Wrangell. You all know what I'm talking about. And I'm looking at the stars, and I'm just like, wow, God, like that, just amazing. I can so relate to Margot, feeling like she's going under. And it wasn't audible. You guys have all had probably some experience like this. But there came this thought, and it just overwhelmed me in a good way, of just this thought. And it was 2 things, actually. It was a thought, and then it was a visual. And it was, you will not be crushed. And then right behind it was the visual kind of this similar thing, except for what I was seeing is God was saying, yeah, you may be pulled out to sea. The devil's going to pull you out to sea, but I won't let him take you. And I was like, oh, even just now, just thinking about it, tears me up. And so behind that, and I went back in and I watched the rest of the movie. It has a good ending. If you want to watch it, you can. It has a good ending. But behind that, I went down and wrote a bunch of verses that meant something to me, something that I could go back to when I was hurting. So this is actually where these verses came from, and what I'm going to be sharing with you over the next 2 sermons is these verses. And so you'll see on that handout, that's what that is. Those are those verses. Are there many other verses about how God is close to us and near the brook? Absolutely. This is literally Brooke's version and what was meaningful to me at that time. And still now, when I'm thinking about it, they're so powerful. So Psalms 34:18 says this: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." What was the word I just said a moment ago that came to me? You won't be crushed. Yeah, I needed to hear, like we saw with Margot being tossed in the waves, that I wasn't going to be crushed under the weight of that pain. And I needed to hear that God doesn't distance himself. I love this. What does it say? God is what to the brokenhearted? Close. It doesn't say God runs away from the brokenhearted. And in fact, in Hebrew, that word close means not only to draw near, but to approach. Doesn't that bring such a different meaning to that? It's yeah, he's sitting there right next to you, but it's also meaning he sees that and he comes up to you and is like, are you okay? He approaches you in the middle of that. Think of it this way. He is like a parent. Those of you who are parents will know this. And I've been in situations where I've sat with like a group of parents, kids are playing, and some kid, they're not even like right there. They're like in another room or they're out in the playground. And somebody falls down and gets hurt, and there's that cry. And you always know who the parent is for that, right? Because all the parents, especially moms, have this ear. They all go, oh, is that my kid? And you see the one that knows it's their kid and that's the cry of distress. They get up and they go, right? You've all seen that, or you've been there. You know that sound. For the non-parents of us, if you haven't experienced that, I've experienced that just with my dogs. If the dogs are somewhere else and you hear that sound, that's not the sound of playing, somebody's injured themselves, you know right away, you'll run to that situation, right? You're gonna go to that. And God does the exact same thing. He knows our cry, just like a parent who's attuned to that. He knows that, and he's gonna run to your help, he's gonna run to my help. He runs to us. And not only that, but he's an active response. What's the second part of that verse was saying to us? It says, and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So not he's close, that's good, that's very comforting, we need that, but saves those who are crushed in spirit. Obviously saved is delivered, rescued, brings safety. But it's not just sympathy, it's an actual intervention. It's active. He's just not passive in that time. Think about the moment I was telling you when I'm out there and I'm like, oh, God, I'm just being crushed by whatever it was, and I really felt that movie there, and that God actively took a moment to say, hey, you're not going to be crushed. Yeah, you feel like you're being pulled out by the waves, but I'm not going to let you be pulled out by the waves. Actively gave me something that I could hold on to. Yeah, through a movie, sure. But God can use any number of things to get us there. The beautiful thing, and we've been studying this too with the miracles of Jesus, we saw many, many times where Jesus was the divine physician. So we already know this. We've seen this. He's the doctor. And Psalms 147:3 says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. God, as the divine physician or doctor, binds up like any skilled medic would, treating, and I love the wording here, treating battle wounds. I actually borrowed this from elsewhere, this wording, treating battle wounds. How many of you have felt in those dark moments that it was like a battle, right? And you're getting beat up, scarred, broken up, etc. And in literal terms, people who have been through battles and had injuries and stuff like that, yeah, you want to be able to, when you come off that line, right, when you're done fighting, you want somebody who can bind that up and bind it up good, do a good job. And of course, we know that God can do that. But here's the thing, even though, as I said a moment ago about like God gave me that word of like, you're not going to be crushed, was I instantly better? In some ways, yes, I felt like, oh, okay, I don't have to carry this burden. But healing is not instantaneous most of the time. We saw in the miracles of Jesus, sometimes there are instantaneous healings, emotional and physical, for sure. I'm not denying that. But for many, many of us, I think this is why it's hard. We wish that they were instantaneous, but it's not. Healing is an actual process. The best thing about this too is not only is God a divine physician, but he's like the best therapist that you could ever have if you have emotional things that you're carrying around, because he knows, unlike those of us who are in that profession, we kind of have to like figure out with you what's happening, because I can't read people's minds. God can, and he knows exactly where he needs to intervene if we will let him, and he knows how to touch right into that place where we need him to touch into there. He's not guessing. However, sometimes we are not ready to go there. Just like in good counseling, people are not always ready to go there. Sometimes we think we're ready to go there, and sometimes literally God's like, we have something that we need to do with this time. And you know what? I, of all people, hate when God's like, well, we're going to sit here for a second. And I'm like, I don't really want to sit here for a second. This isn't really comfortable. And maybe a second's not a second. Maybe it's a minute. Maybe it's years. I know that we do not like when he does that. But here's what I do know. While that is happening, this is 2 Corinthians 12:9, God offers us his strength. Part of dealing with a broken heart is knowing that God offers us strength. And he says, my grace, we all know this, is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Whose grace is sufficient? Yeah, God's, not ours. It's not because we can do it. And whose power is made perfect in weakness? God's power is made perfect in our weakness. And don't you, when you've been hurting, you're in those dark moments, I don't know about you, but don't most of it just feel pretty weak? Whether or not other people know that and you feel that internally, you're just like, to be human is to be vulnerable and to feel that. And we don't like that a lot of times. But God knows that about us, and he's like, look, I know that you can't do this on your own. You might think that you could do this on your own. And he's saying, I have the strength that you don't have, right? And maybe for some of us, this is harder than others. Some of us are naturally stronger than others, and I mean that in a number of ways. Some of us physically are just a lot stronger than other people. Some of us emotionally have a lot of resilience to work on. We have a lot to work on. But even those of us who have lots of muscle and are used to being able to actually literally like move and push things and make things happen with our physical strength, or those of us with our resilience and emotional strength that can deal with people and deal with situations and really make things work and come through a lot of things, even those of us in those situations will eventually come to points where we cannot do that in our literal physical or emotional strength. And God is saying, when you get there, I'm going to be right there. That's what he promises us. I will be there. My grace will be sufficient for you. It's my power, not your power, that's going to propel us forward. Now, Paul knew this very well. Paul often talks about a thorn in the flesh, and there's a lot of debate about what that thorn may be. I'm not here today to resolve that debate, but to acknowledge that he had something that he's like, this just repeatedly would bother me. And a thorn in the flesh is very descriptive too. I'm thinking of, you think of a splinter that you can't get out, or you get poked by something. In other words, it just keeps coming up, keeps bothering him. It's not going away. But I love that God's answer to him isn't removal, actually, but it's empowerment. Because I have things like this too in my life. Like, I want God to be like, can you just can this just disappear, please? And God sometimes is like, nope, we can't. And there's a number of reasons why sometimes these things can't disappear. Sometimes they're natural consequences of earlier actions. You're reaping the consequences of something else, or the consequences of somebody else's actions on your life. Yeah, God's like, no, I can't instantly. Again, does that not mean that there are times where he instantly clears things up? Sure. But I don't know about you, but that is not every experience that I've had. And maybe once in a while, I'm like, well, that was so quick. Many, many times things just continue on. But he promises us that in our limitations will become a showcase for his strength. So our stories, our things where we can't, he's going to shine through that, right? His power is what's flowing through our surrendered hearts. Now, this is an important piece to this, too, because certainly, if you don't know God and you're hearing my voice here, you might be like, well, I've never experienced that. Yeah, you might not have. If you've never experienced God, then yeah, you may not have ever experienced this. So if you need to experience God, then for sure, turn and you can experience him. But if you already have God in your life, he's saying, I'm here right now. It's not to say that he isn't there for everyone, but sometimes if you don't know him and you don't want him in your life, he's not going to intervene. He's not going to intervene and be like, okay, yeah, I'll just hop in and I'll take care of that. If you don't want him in your life, you have to give him permission. And that's this surrendered heart thing. So if you have a heart that's like, okay, Lord, his power can flow right through that. Now, Jesus invites us during these difficult times. You guys know this verse, and you probably were expecting this one coming because it's a classic one when we think about hurting and healing and etc. This is Matthew 11:28, and he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I think we saw this when we were talking about rest not too long ago. It's a well-known verse, and it's well-known for a reason, because there's an invitation right in there. If you don't know him, he's saying, come. If you do know him, he's still saying, come. He's saying, come, and I'm inviting you to do what? Give me your burdens, your weariness, in exchange for rest. And this is a small part of his whole story, right? Give me your sins, give me your brokenness, give me all these things, and I'm going to give you salvation, right? That's the big terms. And part of salvation is this idea of rest. But in this wording, he's just talking about being weary, burdened, and he's going to give you rest. And when you've been hurting, and especially emotional hurting, although physical hurting will do this too, takes it straight out of you. I don't know about you, anytime that I have been injured in any sort of way, so tiring, so tiring. Broken arm, broke a wrist as a kid, all the different things, it takes it just straight out of you. And then you add on to that, any emotional things that you're dealing with, and you're just tired. I talk to so many people who are just plain tired. And yet God is offering them not just rest in the sense of sleep, although sleep is very restorative, we've talked about that recently, but he offers that soul deep peace, the only thing that we can't do for ourselves. Like we just said earlier, he's the best counselor. He goes straight into that. And he invites us, that come is a very active come once again. And that's his invitation is very active to us. It's our part to whether we want to come and exchange our burden for that rest. Now Psalm 55:22 says, in addition to that, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. So we were just talking a moment ago, we exchanged this for that, but now he's saying, same idea, cast those cares. Cast them, throw them, etc. I think that's why there's so much power in seeing Margot's just out there in the storm and she's just hurtling and just in so much turmoil, but basically actively casting that out from her, all that hurt and grief that she was sustaining. And yeah, she gets pummeled. You saw that when Cora goes to grab her. She's in the waves. I mean, she's just getting like tossed in those waves. And yet here God is saying, throw those at me. And he says, I will sustain you, uphold you, support you, nourish you, all of these things. God wants to be our burden bearer. He wants our broken heart. Now you might say, well, what's the point of this? Like, who wants to have a broken heart? What's going on here, God? Here's what I do know. When God doesn't instantly give us an answer and heal that broken heart. One, I do know that he can heal broken hearts. I do know that. And two, I know that he gives purpose in pain. You all know Romans 8:28. And we know, and this can be interpreted so many different ways, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. Now you might hear that and be like, really? Some of you are like, God's really going to take this mess of a situation, this hurt, this pain, and what's he going to turn this into? Who works through all things? Because it also leads us down some alleys, which we don't have time to go down, but we have mentioned this in other sermons too, where we go, well, is God the one that's causing this pain? Is he the one that's hurting me? Is he mean? Is he cruel? What kind of God is this? But the God that we know of, that we're talking about right here, God who is near and close to the brokenhearted, is not the one causing the pain, but because we're in a fallen world, which is a whole nother sermon, as I said, and there is a devil out there that's ready to just take us out to sea, pull us away from the shore, mess us up, make us think that God doesn't care, doesn't want to be a part of our lives, that we're too far gone, all the different things in our pain especially. But there's a God out there that says, oh, no, I can use this. And what does it say? Not just some things. He doesn't go like, oh, I can pick this bad piece that happened to you and that other bad piece, but I have no idea what to do with that. It doesn't, no, God's not like, I don't know how to do this. He doesn't cause, like we said, he doesn't cause all pain, but he can use all pain. So wrap your heads around that for a second. That's a little bit hard to think about, but when you know who God is, he's not causing it, but he can use all that pain, right? He says it works together. I think about, a recipe for a baby, your favorite chocolate chip cookies, right? You put some flour in. I'm not going to get all the recipe ingredients, but you put some flour in, some sugar in, some salt in, maybe put some eggs in, and maybe you have some other things in there, some vanilla, and you're mixing that up. What kind of cookies did I say we were making? Right? So you don't put in your chocolate chip cookies. Do you have chocolate chip cookies? No, you've got to put that together in order to have a chocolate chip cookie. You've got to put all the things together like a recipe. And that good isn't always what we expect it to be. So follow that for a second. Do you ever have expectations for how God's going to utilize something in your life? Especially those of us who've maybe known God for a while and seen him work in different ways, and you go, okay, all right, like you don't love going through this, but then back of your head, you're like, okay, God can use this, and I've seen him, or maybe you've seen him do something great in somebody else's life, and you're like, hey, God, let's turn it out like so-and-so who, turned that around and they did da-da-da, or this turned around for them, why can't I have that? It doesn't always work out the way that we expect it to. In fact, most of the time, I will say, because I'm a poor guesser when it comes to God's mind, I have a general idea that God's working in my favor and for my good, but in terms of the specifics, I'm a lot of times surprised. I'm like, oh, I had no idea this is how we were gonna utilize that. Things that maybe years later I'm like, oh, okay, you're bringing that to mind. Okay, we'll see that. So it's not always what we expect, but I think we get tripped up because sometimes we expect God to answer instantaneously. We expect God to heal us instantaneously. We expect that when we have a loss, I've heard this so many times from people. I know we've had a lot of loss in our community lately too, where people just want to be over the grief. I don't want to go through the grief. I don't want to feel it. Yes, my loved one, has passed, but I don't want to have to feel it. Well, I'm here to tell you that God made feelings, and as hard as it is to think about that, it doesn't work that way. I wish it did for many of us. And this is the part where this verse, 2 Corinthians 5:7, comes into place. We live by faith and not by sight, right? We look around, we have expectations, we want things to go a certain way. And yet, this is where God asks us to trust. Faith is seen beyond our present circumstances, seen beyond that heartache, seen beyond that injury. Living by faith when answers aren't clear is difficult. Living in a world where everything else tries to tell you, don't trust God, he doesn't care for you, he doesn't love you, he wants you to be broken, hurt, all these different things, that's all you're meant for. It is hard. Now, people may not actively say that to you, but you get the sense when you're around people who don't have a hope, who don't have that in their lives. I can't see, But here's the thing. We can trust in God because we know his character, even when we can't see the ultimate plan. So today, bring your pain to God instead of carrying it alone. And remember that God does see your pain. God knows your struggle and offers his strength. And God has not forgotten you, but has a purpose for this time in your life. Let him bear your burdens. Let him mend your broken heart.